Welcome to the Sunday service for the Unitarian Universalist Church of Pensacola. Our gathered congregation represents the area along the Florida Panhandle and the Alabama Gulf Coast. However, today you can join us from anywhere, and we are so glad to have you with us. I'm Reverend Alice Silty, and it is my honor to serve this congregation as minister, and a true pleasure to serve a congregation whose mission is to celebrate diversity, strive for justice, and inspire love. As always, we begin our service with the lighting of our chalice and music for centering with Denise D'Angelo.
Flame of our faith, call us into the community of love and justice, this morning and every morning.
Opening words this morning are by Rod Richards. Stay together and stick together. We who gather here in this tender and anxious and confusing time, we have been awash in a sea of information and misinformation and disinformation. And this information that we seek is simply so that we may make wise decisions on how we respond, and learn how to hold one another when we can't hold one another, and decide how we can be when we can't be together. What is this we face? How best do we respond? And why is this happening? And why, and why, and why? And why do those who suffer so suffer most? Always suffer most from what we now face. Why? And what can we do for those who are most at risk, most vulnerable, all the time and now again? And how do we respond? And how do we hold one another when we can't hold one another? And how do we stay together and stick together and worship together when we can't be together? Yet we are. Here we are here together. Please join me in reciting the covenant of this congregation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Hello, I'm Joe Vinson. Today I'm going to be presenting Hell, a History. This is a look at the concept of hell in Christianity and popular culture, how it has evolved over the centuries, and how what I'll call carceral theology has affected societal thoughts on criminal justice. When we hear the word hell, what do we think of? A place of punishment, right? Where evil people go for eternity? It's burning with fire, home of the devil and his demons, whose entire purpose is to punish the wicked. It's where souls go when they've been rejected from heaven. As Unitarian Universalists, of course, we don't believe in hell. That's what the whole Universalist part is all about, that there is universal reconciliation with God. If we have an eternal soul, and if we were created by a loving and just God, there is no crime or sin we could commit in our finite lifetimes that would warrant an eternity of punishment. People from all sorts of religious backgrounds tend to believe more in heaven than in hell. According to the 2014 Pew Religious Landscape Study, across all religiously affiliated people, 72% believe in heaven, while only 58% believe in hell. That's 85% to 70% for Christians overall, with highest rates for both evangelical, 88 to 82%, and historically black, 93 to 82% congregations. Mormons have the strongest belief in heaven, 95%, with a major drop-off for belief in hell, 62%. Muslims, 89% to 76%. Jews reported 40% to 22%. For religiously unaffiliated, it's 37% to 27%. To look at it another way, the ideas of heaven and hell are so ingrained through popular culture, even some atheists believe in them. Hell, as we understand it in America, is an amalgam of different religions and traditions that has taken on new meanings and interpretations over millennia. Whether or not you believe in hell or any afterlife, there is a fascinating anthropological value in tracing these beliefs. So how did we get here? There has always been a human fascination with what happens after death. Because we bury our dead in the ground, many cultures around the world have independent notions of an underworld, a chthonic land where the dead reside. In ancient Greece, this was called Hades, a dark and gloomy place. All souls were ferried there across the river Styx, regardless of their earthly deeds, with most living on the asphodel fields, though some exceptional individuals got to live in the paradise of Elysium. There is a place even deeper, quote, as far beneath Hades as heaven is above earth, end quote, known as Tartarus, where the extremely wicked were confined and punished, but these inhabitants were mostly gods and other creatures of mythology, not mortals. In Judaism, Sheol is used interchangeably with Hades, an egalitarian domain where all souls go after death. However, we also find the introduction of Gehenna or Gehinnom, an entryway to the underworld that also serves a purgatory-like function of purifying the spirit for a finite amount of time, no more than a year. The name originates from the valley of Hinnom near Jerusalem, which was associated with death and fire. Child sacrifices used to take place there, and some literature suggests it was a place where garbage and cadavers were burned constantly and lepers were exiled. Gehenna is the word most commonly translated as hell in English Bibles. Generally speaking, though, the God of Judaism tends to deal out blessings and punishments here on earth, if not now, then to future generations. With the dawn of Christian eschatology in the first century, these blessings and punishments are increasingly linked to the eternal soul. 2 Thessalonians 1:9 warns that disbelievers, quote, will suffer the punishment of eternal destruction, separated from the presence of the Lord and from the glory of his might. Revelation 20:10 says that in the final judgment, quote, the devil who had deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet were, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. By the time of Muhammad, 600 years after Jesus, the idea of a fiery hell, or Jahannam, is common and well represented in the Quran. Surah An-Nisa 4:56 describes the hellfire awaiting non-believers, quote, every time their skins are roasted through, we will replace them with other skins, so they may taste the punishment, end quote. This is largely understood to be a literal fire, quote, wherein they will abide forever, from Surah Al-Baqarah 2:39, though Muslims, like Christians, have differing interpretations of the nature and duration of the punishment. Jahannam is also home to the devil, or Iblis, who is both ruler and prisoner, chained to the very bottom of hell. In Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy of 1320, hell, or the Inferno, has 9 circles, each punishing a certain type of sinner in increasing order of severity. The first circle, Limbo, is for the unbaptized and virtuous pagans, like Dante's guide Virgil, and is similar to the Asphodel Fields. Next are circles for lust, gluttony, greed, wrath, heresy, violence, and fraud, with many creatures and figures from Hellenistic mythology. The deepest circle of Dante's Inferno, reserved for traitors, is not fiery, but frozen, with Satan locked in a lake of ice. Post-Dante, during the Renaissance period, portrayals of hell became very ornate. Here are some of them. The Pains of Hell from The Last Judgment by Fra Angelico, 1431. The Last Judgment by Jan van Eyck, 1440 to 1441. Casting the Damned into Hell by Hans Memling, circa 1467 to 1471. The Garden of Earthly Delights by Hieronymus Bosch, 1490 to 1500. Inferno by Domenico Beccafumi, circa 1514. Inferno by Anonymous, circa 1520, and De la Grite, or Mad Meg, by Peter Bruegel the Elder, 1561. The King James Version of the Bible was published in 1611, and the name Lucifer appeared in Isaiah 14:12. How you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning! How you are cut down to the ground, you who weakened the nations! This passage is not referring to the devil, but to an unspecified king of Babylon who has died, using a metaphor of the planet Venus, the morning star, to taunt him posthumously. In the original Hebrew, the key word here is Halel, or bright one. It had been translated Lucifer, with a lowercase l, meaning light bringer, by Jerome in the Latin Vulgate. But over the years, readers of the Vulgate began to interpret the Lucifer mentioned in Isaiah as a name, Lucifer. Dante uses it to refer to Satan in the Divine Comedy. By capitalizing Lucifer, the King James translators linked this description of Venus, fallen from heaven, with a few completely unrelated verses, like Luke 10:18, quote, I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven, and Revelation 12:9, quote, and the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent, called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Taken together, these references suggested a complex backstory where none existed in the text. The King James Version made what had been a popular fan fiction official canon. John Milton filled in the blanks a half-century later in Paradise Lost. In it, Lucifer is the main character, a tragic anti-hero who led the angelic rebellion against God and was banished to hell when the revolution was defeated. Yet, it's noteworthy that Milton's hell is first and foremost a punishment for the demons, not mankind. When angels are expelled from heaven, they live and suffer in hell. When Adam and Eve are expelled from Eden, they live and suffer on earth. The landmark 1741 sermon by Jonathan Edwards, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, is very different. In it, he describes hell as the prison awaiting sinners, and Satan as God's jailer, ready to unleash torments as soon as God gives the word. Quote, the pit is prepared, the fire is made ready, the furnace is now lit, ready to receive them. The flames do now rage and glow, the glittering sword is whetted and held over them, and the pit hath opened its mouth under them. The devil stands ready to fall upon them and seize them as his own, at what moment God shall permit him. The God that holds you over the pit of hell, much in the same way as one holds a spider or some loathsome insect over the fire, abhors you and is dreadfully provoked. His wrath towards you burns like fire. He looks upon you as worthy of nothing else but to be cast into the fire. You are 10,000 times more abominable in his eyes than the most hateful venomous serpent is in ours. You have offended him infinitely more than ever a stubborn rebel did his prince, and yet it is nothing but his hand that holds you from falling into the fire every moment. Yikes, right? In this interpretation, Satan isn't God's enemy. He's an employee. By the time we get to the 20th and 21st centuries, hell is such a well-worn and well-explored trope that artists delight in deconstructing and reinterpreting it. How many of these do you recognize?
Now the D and the A and the M and the N and the A and the T and the I-O-N. Lose your face, lose your name, then give it a voice to the flame. D and the A and the M and the N and the A and the T and the I-O-N. Lose your face, lose your name, then give it a voice to the flame.
One of my favorite creative variations of hell is in C.S. Lewis's 1946 novella The Great Divorce, which follows Dante's format of traveling from hell to heaven. The starting point is a sprawling, dingy city where anyone can simply board a bus to leave if they like, yet most decide to stay where, as one occupant states, quote, his finely critical spirit would no longer be outraged by an uncongenial environment, where he would find recognition and appreciation, end quote. In this hell, anyone can make an enormous mansion for themselves just by thinking it, but within a day, they've all quarreled with their neighbors so much they inevitably move to the outskirts of town and build another mansion, and the process repeats. Constantly fleeing to the infernal suburbs, the souls move further and further away, light years away, from the bus stop to paradise. There are no explicit punishments besides the presence of others. Compared to the famous line in Sartre's No Exit, published just 2 years earlier, hell is other people. It seems clear that hell is an evolving concept, a reflection of the societies that invented it. What does that tell us about our notions of punishment? According to Harvard Divinity School professor Matthew Potts, there is a direct correlation between Christian thought and our current justice system. He says, quote, why do we exact punishment after something goes wrong in the world, after someone does something wrong? Why do we think that punishment is the appropriate response? For many people, it is a natural assumption that if you do something wrong, you have to pay for it. When somebody comes out of prison, we say, oh, they pay their debt to society. So this language that wrongdoing incurs a debt that must be paid comes out of a particular account of sin from within the Christian tradition, specifically the way we talk about how Jesus paid for our sins. The way he paid for our sins was through the corporal punishment of torture and death. You could also say he was incarcerated, that he was taken to hell for 3 days and his body was held. The idea that wrongdoing must be paid for also assumes that payment is the way we are freed from the wrongdoing. In the Christian tradition, we are free from our sins not because punishment doesn't need to follow sin, but because Jesus took our punishment. God's justice could not be satisfied unless someone was punished. Somebody's got to be punished. We need to ask ourselves, how do we define justice? Is it restorative or retributive? Many scholars have identified the kind of fire and brimstone religious messages from Jonathan Edwards in The Great Awakening to the fundamentalists and evangelical pastors of today, quote, as a critical component that helps explain the vastly higher rates of incarceration in the United States compared to other Western countries, end quote. That's from Joseph Baker and Andrew Whitehead's article, God's Penology, Belief in a Masculine God Predicts Support for Harsh Criminal Punishment and Militarism. They go on, quote, empirically, however, the relationship between religiosity and punitive ideology is not straightforward, but rather complex. Some aspects of religiosity, such as religious service attendance and perceptions of God's love and forgiveness, have been found to decrease punitiveness, while other aspects of religion, such as fundamentalism, textual literalism, holding judgmental images of God, and belief in supernatural religious evil, are positively related to punitiveness. Members of fundamentalist denominations, particularly those who are white, have been found to be more punitive. Conversely, Catholics with high levels of religious practice have been found to be less punitive with regard to capital punishment, a reflection of the consistent life ethic of the Catholic Church. Here are some numbers to support these conclusions. 59% of white evangelicals support the death penalty in murder convictions, compared to 52% of white mainline Protestants and 45% of white Catholics. Among Hispanics, 29% of Catholics and 24% of Protestants support the death penalty. Numerous studies have found that Protestants, and especially evangelical Protestants, believe in punishment as retribution rather than for rehabilitation or deterrence. These attitudes may be changing, though. A 2019 survey of Christian perceptions on incarceration and justice reform by the Barna Group for the Ministry Prison Fellowship found that evangelical Christians are more concerned than Americans generally and any other Christian subgroup that prisons should be safe and humane. Further, they are more inclined toward the idea of a second chance and the possibility for individual transformation. This may be linked to their core belief in redemption through the grace made available through Christ's atoning sacrifice. Evangelicals are also more likely than other Christian subgroups to disagree with disproportional punishment. End quote. However, when it comes to putting these beliefs into practice, only 22% of evangelicals report that their churches have engaged in raising awareness about criminal justice in the past 6 months. By comparison, 65% of evangelicals say their churches have raised awareness about the sanctity of life, and 42% about drug and alcohol abuse. The study concludes, quote, "While these numbers indicate that the foundation has been laid for the church to use its unparalleled capacity to continue playing a role in creating a more restorative justice system, there is still significant work to be done in challenging perceptions and increasing Christian engagement in advocating for a restorative approach to justice." If we have a carceral theology that revels in the torture of the wicked, it can't be surprising that our justice system looks the same. That we elect politicians who promise to be tough on crime and keep criminals off the streets for longer and longer periods of time. That our prisons are deliberately inhumane in their conditions. That we have, for decades, normalized jokes about sexual assault in prison. That cruelty is the point. If we have a theology that focuses on restoration and reconciliation with God, it makes sense that our vision for the world would also be focused on restoration and reconciliation. That we are concerned not only with the victim of crime, but also the conditions that led to the criminal act and the rehabilitation of the perpetrator. Thank you.
For a church to exist, it must have people that care that it exists. It must have people that support the work of the church through their generous giving of time and talent and treasure. The church is the community of ourselves. Its energy and its resources are our energy and resources. Its wealth is what we share. So as we contribute to the life of this community, we affirm our lives within this community. We will now hear music from Denise D'Angelo while we have the opportunity to text and give.
Closing words are by Theodore Parker. Be ours a religion which, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple, all space. Its shrine, the good herd. Its creed, all truth. Its ritual, works of love. Its profession of faith, divine living.